Welcome to a quick presentation today, which draws on a paper that I wrote around the hope and adaptation scale as a way to map how we respond to change, challenge, loss, difficulties. And a question within it, which is, has our map really become too small as a response to change, challenge, and loss? Is it restrictive in some way? So let's have a quick look through this. Key reference is here below um, from a paper that looks at this map. So we'll look at today the Hope and Adaptation Scales a map. We'll introduce some stories. We'll look at those stories as a potentially limited map. We'll offer some other stories and then consider how they map as a response to illness and have a think about what this might mean and bring together some conclusions. First of all, the HAS gives a map of responses to change, challenge, and loss. So we've got on the map the way you're looking forward, a certain future uh, or known future, concrete future, definitely going to happen to no future on the y-axis and the x-axis, a rejection or maybe a disbelief, a shock reaction to what's happening in the present. They know uh, I can't accept this, towards a complete embracement of it. So that's the full map there. Okay. So when we think about the Haskell, we're thinking about just a map of our response to a threat, change, uncertainty, challenge, problem. Okay, so we're going to use stories as an example to think about the response and what that means. And each story shows different forms of hope, different emotional signatures or outcomes. And um, initially, with these stories, the danger of a limited map. So let's look at some stories. First story from me is about a chap called Mark, has a profession as a carpenter, and he's been told that he's got early stage arthritis. Implication is for his work, and his response is, uh, not me, no. So there's a refusal in that, and not willing to accept it, and the implication and what's happened there is anger and fear, and the questions about the future that have evolved and come through. Um, it's a natural rejection of what's happened and the resultant emotions that come through in that. And that for me is a very natural reaction to to a big part of someone's life that might have been challenged or changed. Um, so within this, I'm not saying that you need to be one thing or another. I think but rather we need to understand how we respond in different ways in the present, how we look forward and what that means and how it makes us feel. Now, the story is by Emma, who's training for a marathon. I spent 2 years training and then tore an ACL. And so the problem is the implications. You're not going to do the marathon, and that removes this idea of a future that was wanted, this to a future that's not wanted. In her words, I felt hopeful at 9 a.m. and hopeless at 9 a.m. Bang, I think about that map, and we're right at the bottom of the future that's gone. And it shows how fragile hope can be. And obviously, there's loss. Uh, there could be low mood as well as a result of that. There could be a part of shock, often comes earlier, but the response is quite limited. And finally, got another story from Elena, who gets consideration of a headache. She's told, I'm not, the reaction is to the investigation is, I'm not scared of what they'll find, I'm scared of because I don't know what they'll find. And this is uncertainty, okay? So not the event, but not knowing. And this is quite common when we think about any condition, illness, the unknown is a big one within that. So what we can see here, we can see the threat and danger of things that happen, the responses to uncertainty and hopelessness, and how that can create specific emotions. Within that, and so if we think about the map and the Y scale, we're dealing with the bottom end of it here, uncertainty, no hope, not sure how to respond. Um, might want to reject and defy it. We look here, this is where the map is on our responses, and we're containing it within the bottom quadrant there, which is why I brought up this idea of a limited map of responses. So the problem, very briefly, is that the above responses, above stories might be completely normal, which is fine. Think when I think about the news, I feel a lot of the time there feels a lot of uncertainty, um, and negative stories, which but really, I guess the response within the map on the Haskell and how we deal with that could be quite limited to a particular quadrant. If we become limited in our response, and we lack acknowledgement or acceptance, there's a danger that we're not open to or aware of other stories, of other ways forward. And so I wanted to briefly, very briefly, just look at some other stories. So it's another story by Mira, broke a leg. This looks at acceptance, stability. She slipped on ice and broke a leg, and the response was, it's not ideal, but it's okay. What do we do? So it's not about being happy about it, and it's not about embracing it, but it wasn't about fighting against it either. So you may think of this as a sort of stuff happens response, and it's about accepting the unexpected. And it's not about resistance, it's not about giving up, and it's quite a nice place on the map because I think it allows a different sort of emotion to result. It's okay. It's what comes through that might be different. Let's look at Sheila's story. Had a stroke, couldn't walk around very well, and ends up walking out breaking a bone. But actually, the way it's viewed is that actually, if that hadn't happened, then the stuff that followed that was good wouldn't have occurred. And actually, in that process of some difficult stuff, it was quite an adventure. So this embracement of the unknown, identified appreciation of what was found, is what's valued in that story. And then we've got another story of James with long COVID. Um, progress is slow and unpredictable, but what he focuses on is possibility. So there's acknowledgement of it, but also the future could be different. The future could be okay. What could be the result of this is that it's possible. And I always saw possibility is really important within the scale on the house on the map. And we'll look at why in a minute. And Miguel's story with back pain and this risk and reward thing where actually pain can create such suffering that actually taking anything or doing something uh, is worth it. So that's another response. But it sort of maps that differently because it might mean we can't accept actually where we are quite now because of what it means. And what we're looking at there is a set of stories that map differently, that move up the scale. Now, what I want you to think about here is, I think it's very easy to go from like got a certain future, unknown future, living without challenge and change as you normally do. That you don't really have to question that. That therefore there's complete hope. But when challenge and change comes, it doesn't have to be met with uncertainty and no hope. It could be met differently. Within the middle two things here, we know that possibility and uncertainty walk alongside each other. They're like, if you look on one side of the street, you might have possibility. On the other side, as you walk along, you could have uncertainty. And the result is quite different in terms of how you feel. So looking towards the future is really, really important in the adaptation reaction. And some things might be seen as possible, some things might be seen as a risk, some things might be seen as more certain. But some of these reactions, in contrast to the other ones, might bring about more positive emotions, relief, peace, uh, and things like that. So when we map that, we're mapping differently, and we're not so restrictive. We're aware of those other stories, but we open up different ones too. And I think that's really quite valuable because I don't want people's reactions to be limited. But I also don't want to tell people what reaction should be or shouldn't be, but I don't want them to be limited. So, some of the conclusions, what are some of the takeaway messages here? Knowing more stories is a good thing. Knowing how people respond in very different ways is a good thing. Taking parts of their stories could be valuable in how you change your response. Knowing stories may result in specific emotions, and it's important to recognize that. It's important, just as important it is to recognize you're thinking about the future in the challenge, you're thinking about the present in the challenge, and and that's going to make you feel a certain way. So we've got these three things going on. Um, Knowing how you react in the present and how you think about the future is therefore important. And I guess the question to leave the presentation today is, which story would you choose there? Which story could you adopt maybe, and consider through change, challenge? And I guess that I think that's a good place to stop, uh, and a good summary really of why the adaptive response can be mapped, and we need to be aware of that map.